operate in truth, right? Operate in truth. Tell the truth.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Gator Truth. I'm Daniel, and on this episode, we're going to look ahead at the Gators matchup against the USF Bulls this Saturday in the Swamp, kicking off at 4:15. And I've got to say that this game is an intriguing one. The Gators taking on the Bulls. The Bulls, of course, winning their big season opener against Boise State. I do think that there is some warranted hype for this Bulls team after that. And I think at some places it's gone too far. Like, oh, they beat Boise State, so therefore it's going to be, has to be a 4-quarter game, and possibly an upset. This Boise State team is not the one that they had last year. Last year, they had Ginty, who was a Heisman contender, made it to New York, and this year they don't have them. They don't have a lot of things. They flew, most of the way across the country to play USF in the opener. Completely different team. So good win for USF, but I think there's been a bit of an overreaction, and who knows, maybe I'll be wrong on that, but I do think there's been an overreaction about how dangerous, and I'm not saying they're not dangerous, but to the point where, oh my gosh, we could lose this game. I've seen a few people kind of react in that way or imply that way, and I don't think that will be the case. But again, could be surprised, but one thing's for sure, that it is a step up in competition. And, they're miles better than LIU. And then next week we go to LSU, and LSU is miles better than USF. With that said, the Gators will need to focus this week. I believe the line is 17.5. I'll be happy if the Gators cover. I can't say that I see that happening, but who knows? Maybe we do see like a 38-17 type score. So we'll see. The Gators 2021 go to Tampa, blow out the Bulls. 2022 come back, and it's a missed field goal away from being a whole different result, possibly. So lots of interesting things could happen, but I really think the most likely outcome is that for a half it may be competitive, but then the talent of this team starts taking over. With that said, let's go ahead. Let's get into what I believe are the keys for the game for the Gators. And the first key I have for the offense, let's start with the offense, is to run the ball. Now, I didn't say ball. I did say ball as in Jaden Baugh. And I know if you've been on Twitter, you've seen that this has been said by a number of people. And the reason for that is Jaden Baugh, just look to last week, very first series of the season. You give him the ball, he's running all over the place, turns getting hit at the line of scrimmage into a touchdown. And I honestly believe he's a guy who will get 1,000 yards first back, I believe, since Gillislee in 2012. I think as long as he stays healthy, he can do that. I believe the math is like 84, 87 yards per game average, went over 100 in game one. Has the potential to do that again this week. I do believe he should get the majority of carries, run them, and definitely sub. I do want to see Jackson, but at the same time, I do think featuring Baugh would not be a bad thing. And then the second key I have for offense is I need to see improved blocking from the offensive line and the tight end. I did defend the offensive line in my LIU review, and I do stand by most of that. Upon some rewatches, there were a few more issues than I saw. But again, I think some of those, like the two I highlighted in the review, could also be attributed or should be attributed to the tight end position. One thing I've seen more and more of is the concern of the right tackle position, which Love at the tackle was the lowest graded offensive lineman. And so what I want to see with that is either improved blocking from the right tackle position or trying someone else there. We go to Death Valley next week. You're facing a decent USF team. Now's the time. If you're not seeing results, do not wait until you're in Death Valley to change things up. If it's not working, try someone else, because we need to be ready for the game in Death Valley next week. And also, it'll make this game so much better for the offense to have the best option available. The final key for this offense, I believe, is to see variety in the passing game. Last week, especially early, it seemed like we were trying to screen LIU to death. Don't try to screen USF to death. Don't run a bunch of short, screen type passes. Doesn't mean you can't do any. But when we saw, so many in a row, and definitely well scouted, and definitely since we've put so much on paper, I've talked about before, Graham Mertz 2023, 80-ish%, I think it was like 78, of his completions were 9 yards or less, and half of that being at the line of scrimmage or behind. Can't be doing that. Teams have caught on to it, and they will play it. LIU played it decently well, and now you're going to start playing even better teams. So show some variety in that passing game. We saw it with Tramel Jones with some of the quicker passing game. In fact, with DJ Lagway, once we started throwing the ball downfield more, he seemed to look more comfortable, started playing better. If we're shaking off the rust, let's definitely do it. I know there are people saying, well, we did that because we were vanilla. There are plenty. Go watch any game. I will guarantee you there's no team you'll find that just was vanilla and exclusively, or almost exclusively on screen passes. You're not going to find it. You can be vanilla and run intermediate routes. You can be vanilla and still throw up some deep balls. I need to see that variety, because with that variety, it will open up, room for Jaden Ball for running room, especially if we hit a few deep shots and guys got to back off, or those intermediate passes that we've talked about. Or, it could, if you got those deeper shots, open up room for some of the screen passes, potentially open up room for DJ Lagway on a scramble if he needs to. Lots of things. Let's see more variety in the passing game. Get DJ more comfortable, and definitely want to see a little bit more of what's going on there. With that said, let's go ahead and move on over to the defense. The defense, first key I have is USF's Byron Brown, their quarterback. He's a dual threat QB. During the Billy Napier era, that's one thing that Florida has really struggled with, and that's dual threat quarterbacks who can run and pass. Byron Brown last week, he ended up with 43 yards running. However, he had 27 yards lost on sacks. I would like to see the Gators, not including those sack yards, hold them to less than 50 yards rushing. I put 79 before sacks. Really, I had mixed up his running total with the running total of one of their running backs. So about 9 yards off. I do apologize for that, for those looking at the slides. Either way, though, gotta hold them to less than 50 yards rushing. Don't really let him make some big plays with his legs. We've seen guys do that, whether it's Reed at A&M or others. Just, if you can contain them and force them to throw, it's going to go a long way to the Gators' victory, and potentially a big victory for the Gators. I know this is listed as number 3 for those watching on YouTube, but this is going to be number 2. Get to Brown. Boise, when they're passing. Boise State had 4 sacks last week. we are a lot more talented than Boise State. Now, they could be figuring out some blocking issues of their own. With that said, with the talent we have, we talked about LIU didn't pass too much, so it's hard really for us to get sacks. If we take away Brown rushing, he's going to have to throw the ball more. We get a lead, they're going to try and throw the ball more. We've got to get the sacks. We've got to show that this front seven is as dangerous as advertised. Get me at least the 4 sacks that we saw from Boise State. And finally, my third key is take away the deep ball. They had multiple deep passes against Boise State, most of them in the second half. After the first half, both offense struggled, but then USF took over, and part of that was Brown got some rushing, and then they would hit some deep balls as kind of Boise tried playing up a little bit to keep Brown from making those rushes. So if we can hold them to a lower rushing total and then get to him on the sacks when he's throwing, that's going to take away the deep ball, keep them from getting momentum, and allow this team, and allow the game to get out of hand. And if it does, that puts more pressure on Brown, more pressure on that O-line. And with that pressure, we can get more sacks and, cause more havoc. This defense, here's the chance to show that you've improved. Again, this is not necessarily an SEC offense, but you've struggled against dual threat quarterbacks. Show that that's not going to be as much of an issue, if it's an issue this year, by getting to Brown and limiting his effectiveness in the dual threat game. Finally, I want to talk about a few keys that I want to see out of this team. And the first is, I don't want to see too many penalties from the team. Now, I know in a game against bigger competition, we may see like a hold here or there, or unfortunately, hopefully not, but see like a pass interference, maybe a face mask, just things that happen. Face mask, sometimes you reach out to tackle to someone, their head just moves in the way you grab the face mask. It happens. Hopefully we don't see any penalties. We had no penalties against LSU or LIU, and that was awesome. One of the few games I've ever seen the Gators go without penalties. Try and keep them to a minimum. This game, penalties will happen. They're part of the game. I'd love to say, hey, get no penalties, but I want to be real about that. The special teams flags, don't want to see them, though. I don't want to see too many men or anything that has cost us points in the past. That's where I'm going to be like, I'm understanding that few penalties happen, but I don't want to see any special teams flags, as the vast majority can be, can be avoided. I also want to see intensity and focus from this team. We talked about blocking issues or, some other issues. And some of that just comes from lack of focus, lack of intensity, and thinking, hey, we're the better team. We're just going to go out and win. Ask Alabama how that worked out in Doak Campbell Stadium last week. You got to show up. This competition, miles ahead of LIU. Next week, Death Valley, miles ahead of USF. Got to be, you got to be focused. You got to have the intensity. And also, if you're bringing intensity to games like this, it won't be an issue for when you go play bigger and better games, both home and on the road. Don't make it a switch that you turn on and off, because sometimes if you turn it off, it's hard to turn it back on. But if it's always, I'm playing 120% no matter the opponent, then you don't have to worry about, can I really turn it on next week in Death Valley? Finally, I'd like to see, and I think it may end up being a key, a big return on a kickoff or punt. And the reason why I want to say this, we saw a few decent returns last week. VB3 Vernell Brown the third had some great things, and I think we'll only see more as he gets used to the game and everyone gets used to being on special teams for the year that are on the units. And the return game can be a big momentum boost, and that could be, hey, just like last week, the offense is kind of hitting a bit of a slog. Defense shutting down USF. What can change it? Well, you punt to Vernell Brown, gets like a 50, 60-yard return on a punt. Doesn't have to be a touchdown, but now you're starting off in USF territory, and the momentum of that can start, leading the route. I think back to a few games back in the mid-2000s, Florida, Tennessee. What changed some of those games? Well, Brandon James, big punt returns. Here, I think a guy like VB3 could end up being the guy to be a returner, like Brandon James was for the Gators. If you're talking about the Gators special teams being called the game changer units, that's what Billy Napier labeled these. Definitely, this is a way it really can be a game changer. So, with that said, we've got the keys on offense, defense, what things I think will be key for the team, like a low number of penalties, like a big return, and definitely keeping or having the intensity and focus during the game. And again, I think this is a USF team that's miles better than LIU. However, I think this is a Gators team that with the front seven, if it is as advertised, should not have a problem past maybe midway of the third quarter, if that. If the offense holds up to their part, maybe even sooner, we will see. But yeah, 4:15 afternoon kickoff should be a lot of fun in the swamp. And definitely give me your score predictions below. Like this video, subscribe, share with friends. Again, we're trying to get to 500 subscribers this season. I will say, if you had asked me what's my score prediction, I would probably go with something like 31-17, 31-20. I believe that there's a chance that USF can find ways, at least early, to get on the board with Byron Brown. And maybe I'm being too nice, but I do think there's a way for that. The line that I've seen is 17.5. I don't know if I fully trust this offense and DJ Lagway shaking out the rust yet to really be able to turn on, put their foot to the gas to blow them out early and really shut everything down. I hope that's the case. I want that to be the case. But with the kind of rusty look last week and then him getting pulled at halftime, it's hard to say that he's going to be completely the player he needs to be, the player that we've seen him be, at least right now. And maybe we see that change during the game. Maybe he comes in and there's no problem at all. But for now, I don't see the Gators covering that 17.5. But I do see the Gators winning by multiple scores. I'll go safely. You know what? Thing about it, I'll go with 31-14, 17-point win. So not quite covering, but right there. I believe this defense is more than capable of giving up a maximum of 14 points to the Bulls. I think this offense definitely could get to 31 points against the Bulls as it continues to just get back into form. And then we head on 2-0 to Death Valley to take on the Tigers. I will say this. If we're not celebrating a victory, which I don't think will be, it'll be an interesting conversation for Sunday. But with that said, always great to be in the football season. Always great to be a Florida Gator. And again, as always, it's fun to do this when we're winning. Hopefully we do a lot more of that this year. And then again, as I say every episode, thank you for listening. And as always, go Gators.